Hello and welcome to the Dyclif Dygest. Today's date is June 12th, 2015 as the time I'm recording. And I say that generally because topics might get old. People might find these old audio clips and be confused about what they're hearing. So that's a nice little timestamp sort of to get everything together. But before I actually talk about any particular topic, I want to talk about sort of the future plans for the show and the direction I want to take this. Basically, I want to keep it around an hour. It seems to be that's a good time for everyone to listen. You don't want to make it too short or too long. That seems like a good thing for me. And I really want to make all of my topics that I talk about sports-wise, like basketball, football, and soccer, I want to talk about them almost even time periods. So like maybe 20 minutes on each. I know that's tough, and I probably won't even be able to do it this time around, but it's definitely a goal, and we'll see if we can get around to it. I generally follow basketball more than football or soccer, so it kind of gets messed up. But then again, if you do or don't care about a specific sport, then you can just kind of gauge where you want to find the audio in this particular episode. So in this episode, I'm going to go from basketball, football to soccer. So just sort of gauge that with how you will, and without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. The first topic that I have to discuss is literally every single game in the NBA Finals so far that has happened. Because the last time that we talked was before the finals even started, and I said that Golden State would win in 6, which it still very well may happen, but it's definitely a lot closer than what it seems. So let's just dive into Game 1 and what I can remember about it, because it seems like it's been forever ago, to be honest with you. Like, this week's kind of been slow, in my opinion. But Game 1, I feel as though the Warriors had the momentum, and they really controlled the pace, and that's why they ended up winning the game. Like, it was one of those games where both teams sort of played the way they wanted to play, but in the end, the Warriors kind of won it because of the way they played, and the Cavs kind of gave into that. And then in overtime, the Cavs kind of folded. I believe they only scored 2 points, and that was at the very, very end of overtime. So it's a rough loss for the Cavs, and I'm sure they wish they had that one. And in Game 2, it was sort of a flip-flop. It was a very impressive win by the Cavs because not many teams can beat Golden State at home. And they actually pulled it off. And I'll say this later on, too, but it's going to be hard for the Cavs to win another game in Golden State. And I'll save that for at the end of Game 4. But Game 2, the Cavs won it basically because of their defense. Like, that's really the main reason. If you take a look in the scoring, towards the end of the fourth quarter in Game 1, you had both teams scoring at a rapid pace. It was honestly one of the best Game 1s I've ever seen in NBA Finals history, and I've seen a fair amount, and that was definitely one for me I would put it top 3, top 5, possibly the best ever. I said it was the best, but you're in the moment, you kind of agree with whatever you're hearing and whatever your mind thinks. So you don't really take a second and step back and really realize what's going on, but as you realize that this is a pretty good NBA Finals, and I'm glad that I'm able to watch it. Game 2, the Cavs won it based on defense compared to Game 1, where the pace was all over the place at the end, and Golden State sort of had an edge over them. The Cavs had the edge over Golden State in Game 2, which went into overtime somehow. Well, really because of a few silly fouls that J.R. Smith made, including over the backs and reach-ins. It just wasn't necessary. It's just giving up free points to the other team, and especially when you foul Steph Curry. So there's that, and there's also the fact that the Warriors took a risk in fouling Tristan Thompson and sending him to the line, and I think he made one of two 2 different times, so 2 of 4 late in that game. And that's what made the difference. That's what made Golden State able to come back and actually send that into overtime. And it's a strategy that a lot of people hate, but it's a strategy that's necessary, like to send those people to the line. Because I know you're taking a chance, but would you rather have a possession that could possibly hurt you as much up to as 3 points, or possibly 0, 1, or 2, kind of just taking the gamble there? I would much rather foul and see what happens, especially a free throw shooter around 57%. You know, sometimes they might miss both under pressure, split the pair. It's a tough scenario to put them in because it's such a pressured scenario and a pressured situation that it's hard to deal with. And ultimately, it's a price that you have to pay if they do make both, but in the end, it's worth it to me. It just kind of depends on the game and how it is and how much time's left. But all those factors play in, and it worked for Golden State, but just not in overtime. And they were unable to succeed that game. Dellavedova's defense was exceptional on Curry. Now, in Game 3, if I do recall, Matthew Dellavedova had one heck of a game, just scoring. I believe he had 20 points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists in that one, 7 of 17 shooting. I have a pretty photographic memory. I'm not looking at that on anything. I don't have that pulled up. But just enough about those statistics alone. He played lockdown defense on Steph Curry, and it was amazing. He actually went to the hospital for dehydration after the game and wasn't released until the next day. So that's pretty intense stuff. Having cramps. It's something. It's legit. Like diving on the floor. I believe he is the 3rd or 4th undrafted player in NBA history to have 20 or more points in the NBA Finals. That's something to hang your hat on. Like he's proving why he deserves a spot in the NBA, and it's honestly amazing to watch. So now we have last night's game in Game 4. And to me, the Warriors really took control of this game early. Really early, just putting the ball in the basket, speeding up the pace. Eventually, the Cavs did make a run in the second and third quarter, just trying to keep up. Got it within 3, I believe, but ultimately the Warriors just started to click offensively and defensively, I will say, and they were able to grow their lead from their sort of 15, and then they lost it to 12. Then it got to single digits, and then they built it back up. It never really seemed close for Cleveland because although LeBron had a decent game, he really didn't have a good game shooting-wise, and Andre Iguodala really outperformed LeBron James in this one. Like, Andre Iguodala did some work this game. Like, I think if you had to pick one player for either team to choose as MVP of that game, it's Andre Iguodala. He had 22 points, 7 rebounds, I think, and ultimately held LeBron to non-LeBron numbers, we'll say, for how many shots he took. And I know he didn't guard him the whole time, but when he's in the game, he's certainly done a good job on him. And to be able to play both sides of the ball and have 22 points and stop your man from scoring, it's hard work. Trust me. Just imagine this. You're literally in the NBA Finals, literally on the highest stage basketball has to offer. Probably in the world universe, to my knowledge, there's not a bigger stage. Unless there's a humongous basketball tournament on Venus that I'm not aware of. This is it. This is the largest stage in basketball. And when you take in consideration, you have to guard one of, if not, the best player in the world, who's widely considered as that. And you hold him to, 30% shooting, we'll say? Something like that, somewhere around there, ballpark. And on top of that, you score 22 points and provide just key energy for your team, that is something that should be applauded. Andre Iguodala had one heck of a game, and that's why this series is tied at 2 apiece. And before Game 4 started, I said whoever wins this game will likely win the series, because if you take into consideration the Warriors have 2 more home games, the Cavs only have 1. The Warriors don't lose at home that often, and they've already lost once to the Cavs this series. I said if they won, they'd likely win in 7, and if the Cavs won, they'd likely win in 6. Now, the Cavs are going to have to get another road win in Oracle Arena. That's a job in itself, especially with the supporting cast that the Cavs have currently. It's definitely a job, and it's not just a job, it's a task and a half. Beyond, like, it's like a job within a job within a job. It's hard to explain, but the Cavs are going to have to do it if they want to win an NBA championship, which they very well could, but I'm going to say chances are the Warriors wrap this up in 7 now, possibly 6. That's just sort of the way I see it right now, but it very well could be the other way around, for all I know. Like, we didn't get just speaking in general here, the bulk of people did not give the Cavs as much credit after Kyrie got hurt. It's like, okay, this series is over. There's no way. And then, like, games 2 and 3, you're like, wait a minute, the Cavs are now the favorite to win the series. And now I don't know where it stands, to be honest with you. It's kind of up in the air. You just don't want to, like, how quickly we forget. You don't want to have that moment and just be like, and if the Cavs prove you wrong again, you kind of look like an idiot. So it's hard to say. You can't really predict these things. You could use analytics. You can use stats. But in the end, you can't measure the heart of a champion. And I've always wanted to use that line for something. For some reason, I was finally able to do it. So it's a moment. But either way, that's the way I look at it through 4 games and possibly through 5 and 6 and 7. Now, what to expect for Game 5? And since they did change the finals format from 2-3-2 to 2-2-1-1-1, it really is different, isn't it? Like, in a way, as much as people like hated the 2-3-2 format, in all honesty, I thought that's a decent format. Although, right, here's the problem that could happen with it. And right here's the main reason why they changed it. Once you have those 2 home games for the team that has the better record and has had a better regular season, you want to reward them for having the most home games. So they have 4 to the other team's 3. So the Warriors had 4 to 3. What could happen in between is the Cavs could have gotten momentum from games 3, 4, and 5 to take into game 6. So they could have been up 3-2 or a variation of that, you know what I mean? So it's kind of, it almost deters what the better team during the regular season, record-wise, has done during the regular season. Because of that, they changed it, and now it's all right, yeah. It's really hard to pick out who has home court advantage, like in certain ways. Realistically and ideally, you'd like to see it go 1-1-1-1, just trade back and forth. But it's a lot easier just to stay in a city overnight and just get it over with. It's real simple. And the format they have now is fine. The format that they used to have was fine. You just got to play basketball. That's what it comes down to. You just got to play basketball. And I believe that's it for finals talk for now. Actually, I want to include my thoughts on Game 5 and what I want to see and what I think is going to happen. What I want to see is another close game like Game 1, and really just not really a fast-paced game, but where it's close towards the end and it's back and forth lead changes. That was some of the funnest stuff to watch all season long. What I think's going to happen is the Cavs are going to get their act together a little bit. And I believe that we're going to see a repeat of Game 1, basically. I think because the Warriors are at home, it creates a great atmosphere for them to succeed. And I really think Draymond Green's going to be clicking and the Splash Brothers are going to be clicking on a better level than what they have been. And for Steph, he's really coming off that slump, and he did decent in Game 4. I think it's going to be even better in Game 5. The Cavs are going to have to work for this win. I believe that the Warriors will get the win, though, and make it 3-2. It's hard to say, but, you can't go against home court advantage, and you can't go against just the atmosphere that the Warriors at Oracle Arena provide for their team and their momentum. Home court advantage does play a big deal, even though there's been 2 home court losses already. This is the NBA Finals. It's just the way it is. But if I had to guess, the Warriors will win Game 5. That's just my random prediction. It very well may be wrong, for all I know. But we'll see. That will do it for NBA Finals talk. Let's move on to some NBA draft news. I believe that Karl-Anthony Towns will still be the number 1 pick of the draft, but I've been hearing around the league, rumor-wise, just random rumors, that the Timberwolves may trade that pick for the Lakers, like maybe swap it, because the Lakers do want Towns, I feel, but they'll also settle with Okafor. Like, I don't think it's a big deal for them. Minnesota said they wanted a veteran player for the first pick of the draft so they can move to 2. And I've also heard that Moutier is an option for the Timberwolves. I don't think that's going to happen with the draft placement they currently have. Why wouldn't they just trade down to 3 or 4 if they want to get Moutier? So I don't know what to expect from the NBA draft now. It's kind of jumbled up, and I don't really know what to expect. It used to be a concise order of who you think teams are going to pick, but they don't necessarily go off of team needs anymore. They see a star and they're like, we got to get this guy now. And it's hard to say what's going to happen. I've heard that Justice Winslow is working out for the Knicks. Willie Cauley-Stein may have helped his draft stock even more. It's something to keep a lookout. Like, it's interesting because just my general prediction, there might be 4 or 5, maybe even 6 all-stars out of this draft alone. This is a pretty good draft, and I think it's going to show in about 3 or 4 years that it is. And we'll certainly see with all the talent that's included in this draft how it pans out. But another thing is to watch out for these a little bit out of the lottery picks, so like mid-first round, late first round. Watch out for those picks, because it's going to be really interesting. There's a lot of talent and a lot of different positions and a lot of different players at those positions that have to offer. Like, you have so many swingmen that can play both sides of the ball. You have a couple big men who can play defense and then play offense and then have a mixture. But it's crazy. It really is crazy. It's just what your team needs. But I think that we're going to see some desperate teams in this draft, and we'll see a trade in the lottery. That is what I'm going to predict. There will most likely be some sort of a trade happen in the lottery, just because of jostling for position or something. So overall, I think the NBA draft coming up soon, actually, if you really think about it, end of June, that's going to be really, really soon. I'll definitely be covering that more exclusively in the future. But I just wanted to share a few rumors that I've heard. And if you've heard some, let me know. I'm always interested in what teams want to do with their future. It's just interesting. But now we'll move on to what I briefly touched last episode, and that was some of the college basketball rule changes. And I'm going to highlight 3 of my favorite changes and why I think they're going to play a huge part next year in college basketball. So first off, we have the generally what everyone knows as the major rule change in college basketball for this upcoming year, and that is the 35-second shot clock is now going to be 30. And I really don't think this will play that much of a role in speeding up the game, but I do believe that the other rules that have been implemented will change this along with it. So it's sort of like you can't fix a problem by just one rule change. You have to have multiple rule changes to help what you're trying to do with the game itself. So 35 to 30 is one step. That's the way it is in women's college basketball, and somehow it hasn't been in men's. Like it's very weird to think about because you have 24 in the NBA, you have 30 in women's, 35 in men's. You have no shot clock in high school. It's different. Like it's a different style. You figured that everyone sort of be coordinated on that and have a general know-how of what to do for the next step, because it is something to think about. Because when you're in college, you have the 35-second shot clock. And when you go to the NBA, 11 seconds, my bad. 11 seconds that you previously had are gone. You have to adjust to new sets. You have to run a quicker style of offense. It's different. It is different. So we'll see how 30 does for the league, but I definitely think that that's a positive direction to go for college basketball. Another one that I think is important is 5 timeouts to 4 timeouts, mainly because there's so many TV timeouts already that I don't even think coaches need them unless it's very late in the game. So you have the under 16, under 8, and under 4. And to me, that's a good system for, television ads, because that's just the way it is. That's the way the world goes round. Just how it is. It's how they make money. It's how this whole system is in place to where we can actually watch college basketball and whatnot. So I'm fine with it. But 5 timeouts to 4 timeouts, I'm in favor of that. I would even be in favor from 4 to 3. I know it's 20 minutes per half, but I think it's an adjustment that definitely needs to be made, and it will definitely make the pace of the game faster, which is what we all want anyways. So my last one is something very minuscule, and it's something that I had a problem with. I literally had a beef with this. I was so glad when this rule change was implemented that it's just one of those things that really grinded your gears, and you don't understand why it ever existed. But the 10-second backcourt violation that we all know, when you now take a timeout with that, it used to negate it completely so you could get it across court fast. The 10-second violation is no longer there. It's just gone. Now, the 10-second violation is still there with a timeout. So what this means to me is that if you play a trap defense, a full court press, this could very well work for you, because now if they burn that timeout, they used to be able to basically the college basketball version of advancing the ball. Now you can't do that. Now you can kind of play the front court to the back court and just make those violations happen even more and more. I think we'll see more teams press because of this rule alone. And pressing is one of those things that's I can see definitely happening now with this rule and 35 seconds to 30 seconds. A lot of teams didn't do it before because it was so easy to break a press and just get your offense going within 10 general seconds. Now, instead of it being 25 seconds getting your offense started, it's about 20. And then your defense can take over from there, and guess what happens? Shots are going to be rushed even more. So I literally just kind of unfolded all that in my mind as we went along there. But those are 3 key rules that are going to change the game, probably for the better. We're going to see how that works out. But that'll do it for the basketball segment of the Dyclif Digest. I'll be back after a short break. Hello and welcome back to the Dyclif Digest. we're going to be covering football in this time slot instead of soccer like we did last week. And really, there's no reason for that other than the fact that I want to go with basketball, football, soccer. The first time around, I really wanted to discuss soccer second. And from now on out, this won't be a confusing point, but it'll be going basketball, football, soccer from now on, just to clarify. And the first topic that we're going to talk about in football is kind of funny, just a general topic. It won't spend too much time on it, but Jim Harbaugh had a shirtless rugby match at Prattville, Alabama. It was sort of like a high school thing, like some sort of camp that he had. I don't know. It turned into a funny scenario where he eventually just went shirtless and started going crazy, as he tends to do. Like, I absolutely love Jim Harbaugh. Like, his coaching methods, everything. He's just such an intense guy. And I feel like if he was my coach, that I feel like I would have to succeed or else I'd die or something. Like, he would literally make sure that it's pedal to the metal every single second. Like, if he's willing to literally, like, stop what he's doing, just take off his shirt and play rugby, like, that's some hardcore stuff. Like, when I heard this story, I was like, well, that's Jim Harbaugh for you. That's it. Like, I don't think there's really too much I need to say about this. Like, if you want to look it up, I'm sure you can find it. It was on ESPN, and there's an article on there. There's probably articles several places. I don't mind these stories. Like, that's one thing I want to touch on real quick. I want to cover sports stories, like what actually matters in the world of sports. I'll touch on like something like this, but I will not talk about anything that doesn't involve a sport. Just to be 100% sure. Like, this discussion about Jim Harbaugh will probably be one of the least likely things that I'll talk about. It's just a little something to discuss. It's a little humor. I like it. Just wanted to say, if he brings that influence to Michigan, who knows? Program's looking in the right direction to me for Jim Harbaugh, but we'll see what happens. Next up, we have the Cowboys using drones at practice, and this isn't kind of what you'd think at the beginning of what you think what a drone does. Like, it almost sounds like a spying mechanism, if you will, but this is more or less just getting a better view of what your team is doing, and I really like this. Technology, I actually wrote a paper stating that technology is either a good or a bad thing, depending on how you use it. So, in this particular case, I will agree with the Cowboys. This is an excellent tool that can be used for good. And imagine this. We watch football in a broadcast view, okay? It's hard to see all the action that's going on. It's hard to see the action that's going on from the field to begin with, like if you're on a sideline or anything like that. But if you have a direct overhead view like you do in Madden, per se, you're going to get a general overall awareness increase. You're going to be able to see what's going on. You're going to be able to see a route. You're going to be able to see your tackles. You're going to be able to see your quarterback, running back, like every little minute detail. You're going to be able to see if a drone's overhead. And I also like the idea of possibly like a small GoPro in a helmet. Like, I would honestly like to see that. I know it'd be kind of hard to implement. But imagine, like, your favorite player running around with a GoPro on his head, and you get to see, like, a first-person view. I know that it would be hard to do. Okay, you have the whole situation where the banging of helmets happen together. Just different things throughout a football game that could jar that loose. But my goodness, is that an interesting concept to think about. You can kind of do that with NASCAR. I don't necessarily watch NASCAR that often, but when I do, they provide some very interesting camera angles every now and then. Like, you actually get to be on board with a driver and hear their radio communications and what they're talking about what they need to do to win the race, what they need to do to jostle for a better position. It's interesting. I'll give it that. And I think the same element could be brought to other sports. I know it'd be harder, but it seems like it would make it more enjoyable to me. It's something to think about. Again, technology, take your time. But next topic is, are the Vikings playoff contenders? And I really have to think about this because it's like something that I'm not very good at is predicting whether a team is going to make the playoffs in the NFL before the season starts, unless it is one of the top 5 teams in the league. I was pretty sure that Atlanta would make it, but then Roddy White got hurt. I was pretty sure that, well, I'm not even sure what team I was going to bring up, but you get the picture. There's been so many scenarios where teams have injuries, they have their feuds and stuff. It's hard to say. Like, oh yeah, I was going to say Philadelphia probably would have made the playoffs last year, but they didn't. It's just so erratic and spontaneous to whether or not a team's going to make it before it actually starts, before the season actually starts. And I've been hearing the Vikings sort of have playoff contention, and I don't know. It's so tough to say. I think that with what Mike Zimmer's been able to do there has been sensational so far, and they've been seeming to move in the right direction with their signings, especially defensively. But the question becomes, how good can Teddy Bridgewater be at that quarterback position for them? Because that is a question that I cannot answer right now. Because there's just so many quarterbacks that, on a scale of 1 to 10, are about a 6. And to me, Teddy's right there in that discussion. I mean, it's a tough rating, like it's just a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being, let me justify this scale real quick before anyone starts lashing out. A 10 would be literally the greatest quarterback of all time, or darn near close. A 9 would be a sensational quarterback who can possibly compete for a Super Bowl. An 8 would be a sensational player that can get his team to the playoffs and maybe have that championship pedigree. And then a 7, possible playoffs. That's basically it. And then 6, maybe playoffs, pushing it. So now you kind of get the gist of where I'm coming from. The Vikings haven't been able to make the playoffs in a while. I can't even remember, but it hasn't been too long. But it could be more frequent. No one's going to argue that. Everyone can win more frequently. It's just finding out a system, finding out how that works. But for me, Teddy's a 6 in my scale that I just randomly came up with off the top of my head. He's a 6. And I just don't know. It's a question mark. But if I had to guess right now, I don't say the Vikings make the playoffs. I just don't see it. In their division, I just don't see it. But very well could be wrong about that, like I have been in the past about random teams making the playoffs and teams not making the playoffs that seem like they should make it. So, hard to say. And then the last topic I have is Odell Beckham possibly having a sophomore slump. Is that possible? He has literally took the league by storm, and he's now a cover athlete on Madden 16. Just sit there and think about that for a second. He's literally a cover athlete on Madden 16. There was a curse, a fake curse that might be real in retrospect, that apparently consumes the talent of whoever is on the cover of said video game. Will there be a sophomore slump for Odell Beckham? I had him in fantasy. I absolutely appreciated the guy because he was the number one wide receiver. Once he really started getting going, he was the number one wide receiver week in and week out. Just absolutely ridiculous. I don't see him really decreasing in what he's done, but it's hard to replicate a season like that. Like, it's going to be interesting because of how the Giants sort of play this out, because you have Eli Manning, who in my opinion has been somewhat spontaneous as a quarterback. He's been good some years, bad some years. He had an off year, down year last year, whatever you want to call it. This year it might be a little bit different. It's a question mark. It seems like no matter what I talk about in the football spectrum is a question mark. Don't know why, don't know how, who, what, when, where, why. All the questions that you can possibly ask, I don't know. But I don't think he'll have a slump, because the definition of a slump is really taking a nosedive graphically, in terms of if you were to look at a graph and you were to look at him game by game last year, it would be up, 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 just crazy. I believe that there will be more stagnation this year, and he won't have as many games like that simply because of coverage and how they're going to attack him. Well, how the defense will attack him. That sounds weird to say because defenses don't really attack, but then again, they kind of do. It's sort of this weird unwritten code that I just somewhat grasped. I don't know. It's weird. But either way, I don't think there will be a slump, but I will think that there won't be quite the season that he had last year, but still pretty good. So that'll basically do it for football talk. I'm going to take a break, and we'll be back with soccer. We're going to go and dive right into what we were talking about last week with soccer, and that was a Champions League preview between Barcelona and Juventus. Now, before we really get into this, I just wanted to say that I did make the prediction that it would be 3-1, and Barcelona inevitably won 3-1. I was very proud of that prediction. I feel like for some reason I can predict soccer better than any other sport in terms of a score or who wins. I don't know what it is. It just seems to be, I just kind of have a better feel for what's going to happen in terms of soccer versus any other sport. Mainly because it's so hard to predict the other score in other sports. But ultimately, I was wrong about who scored the goals, because instead of Messi scoring twice and Neymar scoring once, it was Rakitic, Neymar, and Suarez who scored for Barcelona, and actually just switched Neymar and Suarez in terms of who scored in order. So, I wasn't 100% accurate. It's not like I'm a crystal ball. Imagine a little bit of dust in there. Need to get that out, and maybe, just maybe, we can get it right on the dot at some point. But this was a very good game to watch. It's not exactly last year's in terms of entertainment value-wise, like in terms of just literally the non-soccer fan tuning in and just watching, just to be doing it. Now, I was a fan of both teams, so whatever you want to call that. But I've liked Barcelona a little bit more in terms of my personal favorite. And then Juventus is up there for me, because here's how it is. I pick kind of one team per league to like. So MLS is the Columbus Crew, BPL, Man UTD, Liga is, of course, Barcelona, and Serie A, Juventus. And Bundesliga, I really don't have one. No one really sticks out for me necessarily in that league. I don't know why. But basically that's how my fandom kind of runs. And if I had to prefer one team over everything else, it's Barcelona. So I guess I knew what I was talking about, because I knew these two teams and their roster and just their general play style so well. I just knew how they'd play against each other on a neutral site. So there's that to consider. But in terms of the normal person just tuning in to watch soccer, the entertainment value was still there, but it wasn't as high as it could be because it kind of depends on what you want as a viewer. Last year was a very defensive final with Atletico Madrid and Real Madrid, and I absolutely loved it until the very end, obviously. It was 4-1. And, some people, it might not be their style to watch a very defensive and drawn-out game necessarily, but I absolutely loved it. I love the fact that Atletico Madrid, that any chance that Real Madrid had that seemed like was going to be a pretty good developing play, Atletico Madrid just shot in the ground. Like, okay, we're just going to slide tackle you, get a yellow card, and be done with it. And they had about 6 or 7 of those yellow cards, like, so close. Everyone on the back line, including, like, central midfielders, were basically playing defense. Like, they really just wanted to get that one goal and just not let up. And, that's what they did. But towards the end, they just couldn't hold out for so long, obviously because of injury reasons and whatnot. But we're not here to discuss last year's Champions League final that happened a year ago. Let's talk about what happened this year. So, Barcelona scored very often, like third minute off a Rakitic rebound, and then Juventus scored off of a rebound with Morata. So you have 2 rebounds. Rebound goals, I mean, it's a part of the game, fine and dandy, but realistically, that's like, unless you're a fan of the team, that's not really entertaining to watch. It's just a tap-in goal. But a goal's a goal. If it gets you a point, there it is. So really can't complain. And then you just have Suarez come up clutch and put one in. So that makes it 2-1. And then at this point, I'm like, because, my prediction's on the line, I'm like, I want this to be correct. So they give Juventus a little bit of extra time. I believe there's 5 minutes of extra time that was added, but realistically it went about 7 or 8, which is fine. That's another part of soccer that's kind of iffy for me because the refs can really control how long a game lasts because they can literally end it like 20 minutes, like give 20 minutes of added time. But I think for the scenario, because you want to see a good game and there's a possibility that it could be tied. Like, really, for the most part, that game could have easily been a draw, but Barcelona, I believe, had more possession, as they usually do. That's a main reason why Barcelona wins more times than not, is because they possess the ball not only more often, but just better. They make better of their chances with the ball. They create more chances, and ultimately they play a well-rounded game, and that's why I like watching them as a unit. And Juventus tried to combat that the best they could with what they had. And, they have a very good defensive midfield with Pogba and Vidal. And I'll get to those rumors in a second about Pogba and all that. I have a little bit of transfer stuff to go over. But before I do, just closure on the game. We have Suarez with that huge goal, and then Neymar in what seemed to be the 128th minute of the game, something like that, slots one home, and I celebrate because not only am I a Barcelona fan, my prediction of 3-1 was correct, and I had to tell some people about it. So, all in all, very good game to watch for me. Really, really appreciative of what I saw, and eager to see more from the future. But really, just take a step back if you are a soccer fan. Like, I know that there might be a few listeners here that just want to know more about soccer. There's some that want to hear my opinions on soccer, and there's some that I don't even know why you're here. So, but for those that are just here to wanting to learn more about soccer, just try to take a step back and really understand what Barcelona's accomplished this season. I believe, I'm not sure what happened in Copa del Rey or whatnot. I wasn't really following that all too close. But if you look at their league, like their overall content from top to bottom of Liga BBVA and how they competed in that and how they took home that trophy and on top of one of the most prestigious trophies to have in all of European football. I will call it football just for that sake when you're talking about Europe. But when you're talking about in all of Europe, like literally you include Spain, like Liga BBVA leagues, Bundesliga, you get the picture, like a ton of different leagues that are in Europe just competing for this one prize. And it's definitely, I feel like it's underappreciated. Champions League, it really brings out, you get to see these different teams and how they play each other, and it's absolutely incredible to watch, especially when you take into consideration you have some of the greatest players to ever play the game participating in this event. Messi pulled off some of the greatest stuff throughout this Champions League that I've ever seen. You have the sort of ankle breaker on Boateng, and goodness gracious, I really love that. Like, it was one of those moments that I won't forget of the sport. Like, I'm going to remember that moment for a while. If not, like, until I'm like 60. It's huge. It really is. I think it's not at the place where I think it should be in the United States, and I've talked about that last week, and I'll probably talk about it continuously until it actually hits where it's supposed to be in terms of soccer in the United States. And someday it will get there, but until that day, we'll keep talking. So ultimately, just take a step back. What Barcelona has been able to accomplish this season has been incredible, and hopefully we'll see more runs like this next year and for years to come in the future. And really, if you're just getting into soccer and you really want to see more and you just want to connect with the sport more, I highly suggest you play it. Because you're not going to understand these situations until you're actually put in those situations yourself. And it's a fun game to play with other people, and it's relatively cheap in terms of getting started. Like, really, you don't even really need cleats necessarily, but you just need a ball and something to hit at, like some sort of object. You could use the side of a barn and just sort of paint a figure of how long and how tall a soccer goal is, and just kind of measure it off of there. It's great, just great to get into, and it's something that I would suggest. And ultimately, you don't want to get into something too late, because I think right now soccer is at a very good point in terms of Europe, because you have some of the best players in the world ever. Like, you probably know that Pele and Maradona are two of the top players to ever play the game. But I firmly believe that Messi and possibly Ronaldo, when they retire, could be up there in terms of the best. Like the best in the world. They are certainly on pace for it, and it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of their careers unfolds as time moves on. And it's just something that you'd hate to miss, because, you know, this is back to basketball in a way, but I missed when Michael Jordan was in his prime, because by the time that I was really able to see his greatness, it was pretty much too late. He was a Washington Wizard, and it was the early 2000s, and I can't hardly remember, you know. Like, when he won his last championship, I was 4 years old. You know, it's kind of disappointing, but live now. You got to live now and really just appreciate greatness when you see it, no matter what sport it is. And that's something to take to the bank. All right, now we'll move on to some transfer news. We have Javier Hernandez, otherwise known as Chicharito. I really see him staying at Manchester United. I know that there was some rumors. He didn't get the playing time that he deserved at Real Madrid. But when he did, he absolutely shined. Like, wow. Like, some of the goals he scored was ridiculous. I know that they were up at like 7-1 at one point versus a lower tabled team in the Liga BBVA, but he had a rocket from about 30-some yards out. I think he can really improve what Manchester United's trying to do. You have Robin Van Persie, who's on the decline and maybe on his way out. And overall, I think he's going to get some playing time next year, and Manchester United needs him. He's young too, so he's a very skilled individual, and I'm eager to see what his future holds overall. So sticking with Manchester United, we have David De Gea possibly leaving. It seems like it's a real possible scenario. And this gets into sort of, I know it's transfer news, okay? It is. But then we have his background or his backstory. So you have his girlfriend who doesn't particularly like it in Manchester and much prefers Spain because David De Gea is a Spaniard, and much prefers just the general living area in Spain. I for one, could not complain with Manchester. I've never been to Manchester, but it's definitely some place that I'd like to go to. You know what I mean? Like, it's a place that I wouldn't mind living in from what I've seen from the outside. Now, I understand this is a scenario for him, but he can either go to Real Madrid or stay at Manchester United. And if he does leave for Real Madrid, it's just I don't think it's something that he necessarily wants to do, but it's best for his whole sort of relationship to go to Spain and really just live there. You don't want to get into it. It's a personal matter, but that's just what I see, and that's just what I'm saying. So I don't know if I necessarily see him leaving, though. Like, it's one of those 50-50 coin flips. It's something that I just don't know. I don't have any information to really tell you, to sway you one way or the other. But I will say this. He's never played for Real Madrid before, but he's played for Manchester United, and I'm sure that he loves his teammates, and I'm sure that Juan Mata is doing everything in his power to get him to stay there. And Juan Mata, if you don't know, is another Spaniard that I would assume would be somewhat close to De Gea. So hopefully we could see him staying, but if he does leave, I firmly believe that Manchester United will target Levee from Tottenham. So there's been a report out recently that Levee wants Champions League football. And that's the thing I need to say. I'm going to say soccer when I'm just talking about it in general, but when I talk about Champions League or European, I will say football. So just to clarify. But he does want Champions League. He wants to play in Champions League because Tottenham might get there with Kane, but it's really hard to say. He wants it right now. I see him possibly on the way out, and what better place to land than Manchester United? I think it's a firm possibility that happens if De Gea leaves, but obviously if De Gea doesn't leave, that kind of closes that door for Levee. So ultimately, that's an interesting scenario to see. And then we go to Italy for this one, and we have Pogba possibly leaving Juventus for Real Madrid, PSG, or Barcelona. You know, when you play like FIFA and their career mode they have on there, it's interesting because I've done one where Pogba has went to Barcelona, and some transfers happen in real life. I don't know if I would want Pogba to leave Juventus, because that's one of the reasons why I like Juventus, because of Pogba. It's entirely possible that he gets another chance in the BPL, but it seems like to me that he wants to go to Spain for some reason. Like, it just seems like that's where he's going to be put, unless he goes back to his home country in France, which is a huge possibility. But either way, what I would like to see is him go to Barcelona. Like, of course, I want that to happen, but just to have him in Sergio Busquets' place would be great. Like, I don't hate Busquets. I don't dislike him, but it would be nice to have another player sort of rotated in that with Busquets, because really, if you want to look at it, Barcelona's depth may be their only problem, and bringing in Pogba could easily create more of a well-rounded distribution of matches in the future for Barcelona. So it's going to be interesting to see how that turns out. But if I had to say where he's going in terms of what his decision is going to be, I either see him staying at Juventus or going to PSG. Like, they'll find a way for him to go to PSG. So if I had to bet on it, I'm saying PSG. So there you have it. And the last topic that I want to talk about was more corruption news from FIFA. Apparently, the 2010 FIFA World Cup in South Africa very well should have been in Morocco. Like, it's just such a hard thing to discuss, because it's like, how does this happen? How is there this much corruption? Where did it start? There's so many questions that aren't answered. I know there's an investigation, and the United States probably are among the most just angered people about this right now, because and I say we as in terms of the United States, we wanted the 2022 World Cup or 2020, wait a minute, it would be 2020, right? I'm losing my mind, but either way, the next World Cup after the one Russia currently has, the one that's in Qatar, we wanted that one. Like, I thought, like, okay, you have this large nation that wants to host a World Cup and would succeed, but yet this Qatar place that barely any Americans ever heard of gets it. And, Qatar is an interesting place. I'm wanting to learn more about it. I'm going to have to watch a documentary about it, because that's probably the best way nowadays, realistically, to learn about something. Just watch a documentary, just sort of get a grasp on it visually, really photographically remember what you see, and just convert that into memory. So it's a very good way. I might do that. But either way, that's something like Morocco. Like, it doesn't affect me at all, but it really is unfair to the people of Morocco that probably placed the highest bid to win the World Cup and then just not get it. Like, I don't know. It's just a brain scratcher. Not a knee slapper. That's completely different. But there's just been so much talk of corruption. Like, when did this begin? 2006, 2002, 98? Who knows? It may... I just want to know how this started. I'm just sitting back here and I'm like, what questions can I ask? Or what question do I absolutely want to know the answer to? It's how this whole thing started and who with. That's what I want to know. Hopefully we can find these answers out, and by next podcast, next week, we can finally get an answer to this. We could finally maybe probe more information that needs to be answered and needs to be discovered. Maybe. It's hard to say, but I would absolutely love a World Cup in the United States. I don't know how much that would cost, but it's something that's definitely in my future that maybe, just maybe, is obtainable for me to go to. Now, if it's in Qatar or Russia, I probably can't do that, because what they're doing with the World Cup right now in Russia is they're actually moving it to like winter, so it won't be as cold in Russia, so there'll be more people. See, I just don't know if that's practical. I don't know if that's a practical scenario to do, because that reschedules a lot of stuff that's happening in that year. You know, it messes with a lot of things, and I think they just need to keep it at the same time, because I have these memories set in my head. Like, I remember the 2006 World Cup. I really loved it because I went to the beach that year, and I saw these like jerseys, these Brazilian, Argentinian, just all kinds of different jerseys from different places in the world. And you see people wearing it. You see people play soccer in the sand. It's something, you know, it's something to do in between your day at the beach. And I just sit back and I really think about that, because that happened again in 2012, right? I can't even... Wait a minute. Let me just think for a brief second. 2014, my bad. See, I don't know what it is about every other year and every quad year, how they have that set up. I thought, for some reason, I was thinking it was in 2012, but that must have been like some other tournament I'm thinking of. But my apologies, 2014, that was literally last year. Man, how time flies. It's crazy. But either way, I was at the beach again, and I was able to watch Italy and Uruguay play. And it's just a memory I'm always going to have. Like, I want to be able to have that particular memory in that particular time frame, in terms of vacation-wise. Just seeing people play soccer in the sand, just seeing the sport itself grow around you is something to see. And I don't think that's a possibility in wintertime, you know? Like, sure, it's good for people that want to actually go to the World Cup in Russia, but for people who have somewhat warm weather normally during summer, isn't going to have that same weather during the winter. So whether or not Russia gets stripped of the World Cup or Qatar gets stripped of the World Cup or not is still a thing. They still have plenty of time to decide that. You know, it's not really going anywhere. But for me, right, here's what I think is going to happen. I think Russia's going to be kept, because that's a huge nation, and they'll do a lot of things to keep it. But Qatar, I think, in my personal opinion, they'll end up getting stripped of it, and hopefully, I see United States or England really getting that one of the two. England's been wanting one as well to host, so we'll see what happens. But only time will tell, and only time can heal all wounds. So with that, I think we're going to call it a show. Hope everyone enjoyed, and we'll be back next week.